I have no idea how this video is going to go. I've got no script and no notes. I'm doing it off the top of my head. But a couple of days ago I watched a documentary. That in itself is nothing remarkable, not enough to get me out recording. But this was a documentary which I hadn't have heard of and wouldn't have heard of had it not been for violent protests at a university in Scotland. So this documentary, which is available to watch for free here on YouTube, is called Adult Human Female. And adult human female is the dictionary definition of what is a woman. I think it's a clever play on words because the documentary by Matt Walsh from the USA, What is a Woman, ended with the conclusion an adult human female. Now this is a British film, but both What is a Woman and Adult Human Female sparked violent protest. Attempts to get the films, well, so they couldn't be screened. And in Edinburgh, I think it is, that has worked. So which group of people is it who feel compelled to stage aggressive violent protests to stop a film being shown about womanhood? Well, it should come as no surprise, it's the trans activists. Again.
What are they?
They were once men.
For the last few months, to me, it's felt like this channel should just be called Disgruntled Danny ranting about the trans movement. And that's because, well, they're fucking everywhere, aren't they? For such a tiny minority in society. Every time you turn on the internet, or the TV, or the radio, the fucking trans propaganda's there, in your face, screaming and wearing too much makeup. And in the past, I've said, if you're watching this and you're trans, I wish you the best on your journey. But now, I'm going to add a caveat to that. If you're trans, I wish you the best on your journey, provided you're not trying to take rights away from actual women. Because the trans movement is the only movement in history where an oppressed group, or rather a perceived oppressed group, because the trans community are the most fucking protected people on earth, at least in the Western world, this is a group who are actively taking rights away from another oppressed group, women who've been oppressed throughout history. This is the most misogynistic movement currently on earth. I'll rephrase that. The most misogynistic movement in the Western world. All Islamic countries treat women like shit.
Those rights are being denied by you. Get out of my way.
Please, just calm down.
I want Islam. I want Islam.
Please stop. Please stop. You can't.
No.
You can't. Please just go back here.
So there, we had a group of trans ally protesters stopping a disabled woman from watching a film. And this should come as no surprise because the trans movement is incredibly violent. But how do we get to this place? Well, we need a short history lesson. Around 25 years ago, the term transgender didn't exist. Instead, we had people who were transsexual and also transvestites. Now, transsexuals are people with a really horrible mental illness called gender dysphoria. But that's what it is. It's a mental illness. And they get surgery to make them feel like they were in the body which they thought they should have been born into. Now, a lot of trans activists will use this mantra, sex assigned at birth. No one's sex is assigned at birth. Your sex is assigned at conception. Whether you are male or female, that was decided when your mother was ovulating and your father blew his batter cannon up her love tunnel. Then there were also transvestites, and these were men, and between 2 and 4% of the British male population cross-dress. These are men who dress as women as a form of sexual perversion. It's a kink, it's a fetish, it's what gets them off. But when the term transgender was coined, the two got mixed together. And things have been going wrong for women ever since. Here's a short clip from Adult Human Female.
The ideology is actually so bonkers that it's very difficult to get people to believe that they're actually trying to do what they are actually trying to do, right? You know, you still get people coming out being like, they just want to live their lives and just be it's like, if we were just talking about transsexuals who just wanted to live their lives and needed some accommodation to be able to move through the world, then we would not be in this situation. They're not just trying to live their lives. They're trying to redefine the sex question on the census. They're trying to make it impossible for female people to have female-only rape counselling. They're trying to make it impossible for female people to ask for a female healthcare practitioner. They're putting male sex offenders in women's prisons. They're potentially going to destroy women's sport, right? Just for starters, they're pressuring lesbian sexual boundaries. They're sterilizing gender non-conforming children. Like, we can go on, right? That's and that's a lot of that is grounded on this kind of insane sex denialist aspect of the ideology, right? So you come along and you tell people, no, what?
Every point made in that 1 minute and 10 seconds is completely relevant. And I think we've reached a point now, God, this video's dark so far, isn't it? We've reached a point now where I don't believe you can be pro-women's rights and pro-trans rights. Because if you are pro-trans, you are by definition anti-female. As I've already said, trans women are some of the most misogynistic men on earth. And in the documentary, they explore this mantra, trans women are women, and how ridiculous that actually is. Because if trans women were women, they wouldn't need the word trans, they wouldn't need that prefix, they would just be women. So all of us who live in reality know that trans women aren't really women, apart apparently from some trans women. And because this video has been so dark up to this point, I've just been online and got some clips so we can have a laugh at how deranged some of these fuckers actually are.
Just because you have an issue with trans people doesn't mean trans people are an issue. Just because you feel threatened by my freedom doesn't mean I pose a threat to you. Our taking up space as our truest selves takes absolutely nothing away from you. There is infinite space for us all to live and thrive in our truth. And anything that makes you think or feel otherwise is birthed from your fear, not reality. Trying to hate us out of existence will not free you from the unresolved pain that our power shines a light on. So stop making your discomfort our problem and let us be.
I think my point on misogyny was beautifully demonstrated in that clip. Because here we have a confused man in a dress basically saying my rights are more important than those of actual women, and if women have a problem with it, they're the aggressor. So we have a man who will be physically larger and much stronger than the vast majority of women, demanding to be allowed to use women-only spaces because it makes him feel better. But should women actually be concerned about their safety when they're in the company of trans women? Well, of course, most trans people won't be violent. But statistically, let's put it this way. In the UK prison population, 18% of male offenders are inside for serious sexual offences. 2% of female offenders are inside for serious sexual offences. But when it comes to trans women, 54% of trans prisoners are inside for serious sexual offences. No other demographic gets anywhere near them. But that's not the only thing women should be worried about. No, women should also be worried, straight women at least, that trans women are going to replace them as straight men's girlfriends and wives. Or at least this utterly deranged person thinks so.
This video is for cis girls, specifically the straight ones. We're in the same dating pool. When I'm talking to you about the guys I'm talking to, they're the same guys you're talking to. They're also your brother and your dad. Don't think about it as the guys that like trans girls. Think about it as the guys like trans girls.
So, I'm a married man, so maybe I can't comment on this. But if I were single, there's no fucking way on earth I'd ever date a trans woman. In fact, I don't know any straight guy that would. This argument that guys like trans girls, no we don't. The guys who like trans girls are like the trans girls. They're people with weird kinks and perversions. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. If I had a gun to my head and I had to either have sex with a trans woman or a gay man, I'd hope they could find an effeminate bloke, because at least I know what that is. Not something that belongs in the fucking circus. And it astounds me that there are trans women who apparently know less about actual women than straight men, as this clip will now illustrate.
Just a PSA to all my fellow trans girls out there on estrogen. We do in fact get periods. We do. It took me literally complaining about cramps to another trans woman for me to find out, but doctors don't tell you shit. Just talk to other trans girls.
Trans women do not have periods. I have no idea why that confused man in a dress thinks that he has a menstrual cycle, but he hasn't got a womb. We all know this, and the comment, the doctors don't tell you shit. Who should you trust then? A medical professional who spent 7 to 10 years to get to where they are? Or a bloke called Derek who's put on a dress and now calls himself Barbara? When I think back to when I started this spectacularly unsuccessful YouTube channel, I used to do a lot of rants about feminism, because back then third wave feminism, as it was called, was full of very angry women who hated all men and also hated all women who didn't go along with their vile rhetoric. But if we take the definition of feminism being equality between men and women whilst acknowledging that we're different, I 100% agree with that. The trans movement has made me into a feminist. As ever, thanks for watching.